Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Kat. For today's video, I'm going to be doing a recent reads wrap up and also an April wrap up. From March till April, I read a total of 8 books. So I'll go over the books that I read and then the books I read in April and also the books I did not read in April that were part of my April TBR. So since my last recent reads wrap up, I read Court of Ravens Duology. This is by Liz Vander. In this we have Feathers So Vicious and Shadows So Cruel. This duology is a dark romance duology, and basically it's about Galantia, who is a human, and her kingdom is at war with ravens, or shape-shifting ravens. Her dad is known to be like this ruthless, violent man who's killed a lot of ravens. To take revenge on him, one of the ravens kidnaps her and brings her to their world, their kingdom, and the Prince of Shadows, who rules over that kingdom, intends to make Galantia suffer. So that's kind of the whole premise of this duology. I do want to first start off by giving trigger warnings. There is literally almost every trigger warning you can think of. It is spread across both books, so please read the trigger warnings. I believe it's on the author's website too, so please check them out. I want to start off by saying that I don't think dark romance is for me. It is too triggering. The only problem is I love the plot of dark romance books, and that is the problem. Like, I want to read it for the plot and read it for the characters, but just the trigger warnings is what pushes me away. There's so many dark romance books that I have such huge interest in reading, but I feel like until I can read the triggers or just like face it, I won't really be able to read the books. So with this duology, same thing. The plot, the characters were so freaking good. Like, I could not stop reading these books. I think I finished it in like 5 days, or like less than a week. And the only issue was just reading through those triggers. That was the hardest part. I did give both books 4-star ratings because my overall enjoyment of the book was great, but just the triggering parts were hard to digest and left me feeling very nauseous. So that was not enjoyable. But other than that, these books were really good. For the first book, Feathers So Vicious, the plot was really good. Like I said, it kept me going. The world building wasn't too complex. It was actually not very fleshed out, I would say, in my opinion, but good enough to keep you in that world. The ending definitely did throw me off. Like, it took me by surprise. It was a really good ending. The characters were pretty questionable, especially the Prince of Shadows. He is a very questionable dude. There was also a lot of non-consensual scenes that made it uncomfortable for me to read, or I don't know what it's called. It's like morally consensual scenes. Like, I don't know how to really describe it because it's non-consensual, but Galantia also enjoyed it. So I don't really know what to call that. If you know, please let me know. In this book, she does have 2 lovers, although I'm only interested in one of them, even though he's really cruel, because his backstory is very heartbreaking. So you kind of really learn why he is the way he is. Also, Galantia's character itself fell kind of flat for me. I mean, I didn't hate her, but like, it definitely wasn't, she wasn't the most developed character, but it was still a good book. I got through this pretty quickly. And then with book 2, it was also very interesting, very much enjoyed the plot. I did skip a lot of like the triggering scenes, as I did with the first book too. And I also skipped a lot of the spicier scenes because I realized a lot of the spicy scenes in these books were not my cup of tea. I did enjoy the author's writing style, and I did enjoy Galantia's development. Like, in the first book, I did feel like she was flat, kind of 2D, but in this book, we see she is stronger, she is braver, and she does stand up for herself. So I love seeing that in female main characters. You do get multiple POVs, and if I can remember correctly, I think in the first book, you also get multiple POVs. One person's POV annoyed me the most. I did not like reading from his POV, but overall I liked seeing the story play out through the different characters' eyes. The ending was heartbreaking, not gonna lie. It made me really sad, but I do feel like it wrapped up really well. This book gives more flashbacks of Prince of Shadows' backstory and all the abuse he endured, so there's a lot of description of abuse and essay scenes, so again, this whole duology, if you want to get into it, just be wary of a lot of the trigger warnings. Overall, it was great, and I had a good time with this book too. And then I read Mr. and Mrs. Witch. This is by Gwenda Bond. This book is about our two characters, Savvy and Griffin. Savvy is a witch and Griffin is part of a witch hunting organization, but they don't know that about each other. So on the day of their wedding, their identities get revealed to one another and they are now at odds with each other. However, they eventually have to team up with one another towards a common mission and a common enemy. This book I gave a 3-point-star rating. It wasn't the most exciting book. I feel like it was very slow paced and the plot wasn't that enticing. I did like the banter between Savvy and Griffin. I think it was fun to read and I liked their chemistry as well. However, I feel like the book as a whole was just okay. It was good enough to keep me reading, but it still was pretty much on the slower side. After that, I read Starter Villain by John Scalzi. First of all, this cover, this is it. This cover is it. This was such a fun read. I hope I can convince everybody to pick this book up. It is a short book, so it's definitely not something that will take too much of your time, but this book was hilarious and just such a fun time. I gave it a 4.5-star rating. This book is about Charlie, who's a man who's down on his luck, but one day his rich, estranged uncle dies and leaves Charlie his villain business. And so now Charlie has to take over this business. He learns that the world isn't what it seems, and his uncle's enemies are now after Charlie. This book was everything and more. I had such a fun time reading it. It was definitely up my alley. It was fantastic. The humor was so good and the characters were so fun. I really loved Charlie. I loved his witty, intelligent comebacks. We also have intelligent cats who are like spy agents and they communicate with people through typing on a keyboard. It's so freaking funny. And then we also have intelligent talking dolphins who are trying to unionize. It was literally just such a great time. I love how Charlie does not take himself seriously. Actually, this whole book does not take itself seriously at all. It's super light and just fun and a great palate cleanser. So if you're looking for a book that first of all has an awesome book cover, but also is just fun and lighthearted and a book that will make you laugh, then please read this book. It is great and I can guarantee it will get a chuckle out of you. Then I read The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy, and I have a whole reading vlog about me reading this book and going through all my emotions, so you can definitely check that out. I gave it a 5-star rating. It was beautiful. It was a masterpiece. It was so fun, a roller coaster. I was going through so many emotions and feelings, and I had such a great time with this book. So 5 out of 5 stars. After that, I read The Rainbow Quest, and this is by Rosella Crawford Bathurst. The Rainbow Quest is about Allie, whose mother is dying, and one day she comes across this man who has her embark on the Rainbow Quest, and by the end of it, she's granted a wish, I think, and she wants to wish for her mom to be cured. I went into this thinking that's going to be fun and very cute, and it was, but it definitely wasn't what I expected it to be, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be. I didn't have the greatest time with this book. I did end up giving it a 2.5-star rating. This book had a lot of potential. I did wish that it was fleshed out a little bit more and just developed more. I think it would have made for a better book, in my opinion. It did read younger, so I do feel like it is for a younger audience, and maybe that's another reason why I didn't enjoy it as much. I did not like the pacing of the story. It was kind of all over the place, to be honest. What I did like was the different colors that are represented in this book and what each color of the rainbow meant. So I think that was really fun and symbolic to read about. But aside from that, I feel a little bit sad and disappointed because I did have high hopes for this book, but it just did not meet those hopes and expectations. but that's okay. Then I read Oblivion. This is the third book in the Nevermore series by Kelly Craig. I am so happy to be finally done with this trilogy because the third book was lingering around on my bookshelf and I was just waiting to finish this trilogy off. But the Nevermore series basically is a take on Edgar Allan Poe's poems and stories and kind of twists it into something darker. The premise and concept seems so interesting because it's about Edgar Allan Poe and his works, also has to do with dreams and like dark nightmarish creatures. So I thought it was a really interesting premise. However, it just ended up not being my cup of tea. I ended up giving this book a 2.5-star rating. I think the first two books I gave it like maybe 3 stars. So it was very average. It's interesting because the main character, Isabel, she's trying to save Varen from his nightmare. Even though he tried to kill her in the second dream, she still loves the guy. She still loves him and writes love letters to him. So it's very like, it gives me like 2010s CW TV show vibes or like 2010s YA books. So that's the vibe I got, and maybe that's why I didn't like it too much. Just felt very, very, very childish. I'm just happy to have concluded the series. And then I read Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. This is by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the second book in her From Blood and Ash series. I read the first From Blood and Ash book years ago, and I actually liked it. And I think it's because it was my first romantasy book that I read, so me being new to the genre, I enjoyed something different. And so I decided to pick this up because I was like, okay, I enjoyed the first one, I might enjoy the second one. No. I did not enjoy this book that much. The best way I can describe my reading experience with this book is like eating candy. Candy, of course, isn't good, but sometimes you just can't stop. And that's how Kingdom of Flesh and Fire was for me. It wasn't great. It really wasn't. But I kept reading it because it was just fun. That's all. Mind-numbing fun. I did have a lot of issues with this book, to be honest. Let's start with the things I did like. I liked Castiel's character. I think he was like the only character I enjoyed reading about. So all his scenes, his dialogue scenes, they were very fun to read. Aside from him, nothing else was really that interesting. The repetitiveness in this book was insane. And I don't recall if it was like that in the first book. Honestly, I don't really remember much of the first book. But the repetitiveness in this book was freaking insane. Like, I could predict what the next sentence was going to be. That's how repetitive it was. I did like the storyline and plot of this book. I thought that was interesting. And I am willing to continue the series just to see where it goes, but I just hope it's not as repetitive as this book was. Like, the amount of times I read about Castiel's dimples every time he smiled is insane. The amount of times Poppy wants to stab Castiel and literally everybody she sets her sight on is insane. The amount of jokes about her wanting to stab people is insane. Literally, that's all you basically read about is how much Poppy wants to stab people and the jokes about her being a stabby character and violent and all these things. And it's like, why? Like, can we stop, please? It's like reading the same thing word for word almost every page. Okay, quickly moving on to books I did not complete in April for my April TBR. The last book, The Dark Day's Deceit by Alison Goodman, Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, Sword of Kaigan by Emma Wang, and Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. That's all I have for my recent wrap-ups and the books I finished in April and the books I did not finish in April. There are probably a couple of books that I'm going to carry over to my May TBR. Definitely Sword of Kaigan because I do want to get to that book eventually. Probably Daughter of Smoke and Bone, maybe the two Evelyns. Right now I'm reading Hero of Ages, which is the last book in the Mistborn trilogy, and I will have a reading vlog for that as well. Let me know how your reading went for the month of April. On that, take care of yourself, take care of everybody around you, be safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.